Hello from Mindpads. Today we will discuss commentaries in macroeconomics. More private investment will put China's recovery on firmer ground. The article emphasizes the need for private investment for stabilizing the economic growth in China. In China, the private producers contribute to more than 60% of GDP and 80% of total jobs. Apart from the interest rates, the investment depends on conducive environment mainly in terms of financing, legal guarantees, and policy. The increase in investment will provide injection in the circular flow of income and lead to increase in aggregate demand and economic growth. Topics include economic growth, components of aggregate demand, circular flow of income, investment, consumption and government spending, interest rates and money supply, and expansionary monetary policy. Use the national income equation, circular flow of income and macroeconomic diagrams to explain the current situation and possible solutions through expansionary monetary policy, market-based supply side and demand side policies. Evaluate the effectiveness of expansionary monetary policy, market-based supply side and demand side policies in the short term and long term in achieving economic growth. Japan dodges recession as first quarter spending lifts GDP 1.7%. The article reports the first quarter recovery in economic growth rate in China thanks to the government and consumer spending making up for the slump in the business investment. The Japanese government further planning not to raise the consumption taxes and focusing on a supplemental fiscal package. Topics include economic growth, components of aggregate demand, investment, consumption, government spending, expansionary fiscal policy. Use the national income equation and macroeconomic diagrams to explain the current situation and the possible solutions through expansionary and fiscal market-based and supply side of demand policies. Evaluate the effectiveness of expansionary fiscal and supply side policies in the short term and long term in achieving economic growth. More rate cuts on lower inflation. Good monsoon. Rajan. The article reports the recent and ongoing lowering of interest rates by the Reserve Bank, the Central Bank of India. The interest rates level, the lowest in the 5 years, have resulted from stable inflation rates and realized fiscal deficit targets. Also, Reserve Bank predicts further interest rate cuts in future supported by good monsoons and stable food prices. Topics include expansionary monetary policy, interest rate, inflation, fiscal deficit, and economic growth. Evaluation will cover the role of interest rates for economic growth, the relationship between interest rates, inflation, and the fiscal deficit in effectiveness of expansionary monetary policy in the short term and long term. Low inflation risks budget day rate cut. The article predicts the Australian Reserve Bank to lower the interest rates in response to declining prices. The inflation, especially the consumer price index, fell below the desired range set by the Australian Reserve Bank because of declining crude oil prices and widespread discounts resulting from declining aggregate demand in Australia. Topics include interest rates, inflation, the relationship between interest rates and inflation, causes and consequences of supply side and demand side disinflation. Explain using the national output diagrams and discuss the combined effect of supply side and demand deficit disinflation. Evaluation will cover the effectiveness of monetary policy to tackle recession, government intervention to tackle disinflation, to prevent downward spiral towards recession, unemployment, and the combined impact on consumers, producers, and society in the short term as well as long term. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Do visit us at Mindpads.org or write to us at Mindpads.org@gmail.com.